What's going on, gamers? Welcome back to the Scavenger devlogs. For anyone out of the loop, Scavenger is a co-op horde shooter that I'm working on, where you go out into a procedural apocalyptic wasteland, scavenging for weapons and supplies, all while fighting chaotic undead hordes with your friends. Also, I recommend checking out all the other devlogs just to see all the features that I've been currently working on. Anyways, though, it's been a minute, but I've been cooking in the kitchen for a while and got some juicy things going on. Also, make sure to stay to the end of the video for some cool new stuff you're not going to want to miss. So, to start things off, I thought it'd be good if I continued to add more weapons into the game, because, well, it's pretty important or else you'll just die. Originally, I wanted to see if I can make up the majority of the arsenal for this update, but then quickly realized that this devlog wouldn't come out within the next eternity, so I figured I'll just be kind of sprinkling them out throughout these devlogs, like a nice little seasoning to keep things spiced up. The big time consumer in this area is the animations. I mean, there's a lot more to it, of course, but the animations alone just take too damn long to even do one set of them, so it just makes more sense to build up the arsenal over time. So in comes what I'm calling the Marksman Rifle. Not necessarily as powerful as a sniper rifle, but in turn can fire a lot quicker, and with some nice pinpoint accuracy so you can land your headshots easier. I wanted to get a weapon like this into the game to see how I can handle sniper scopes, especially since there's many approaches I could go for. I could go CSGO style and just make it one press of a button and the sniper scope instantly comes up on the screen. Or I can do it similarly to how I'm doing the other scopes, where it's just a camera fed into the scope and we zoom in on it a little bit. Both approaches, though, I didn't really end up vibing with, so I ended up coming to a little bit of a compromise of both. Similarly to how Call of Duty does it, or at least in the old games, you still see the ADS animation, but it will nicely fade into the sniper scope filling the screen. And there's also a little bit of sway where you'll have to hold your breath to stabilize the scope again. I feel like this also opens up a nice way for me to introduce some skills later on that you can invest into being like a better sharpshooter. The scope itself is very temporary. It's literally like the first image I found on Google Images, but that's a design problem for another day. The scope itself actually wasn't as much of a pain in the ass as I thought it was going to be to implement. Basically, all it involves is hiding the gun in player models and zooming in the camera and then slapping the overlay over the screen. The sway is just a very mild camera shake, and when you hold shift, it'll slowly fade out. It's hard to convey how it feels without playing it yourself, but it actually turned out way better than I thought it was going to be, especially for how easy it was. Now, guns are cool and all, but they don't really mean much if we got nothing to shoot at. So for the first time since the first build, we have the base zombie back in the game. I figured I would build the AI from the ground up rather than copy from the other project because it was a little messy. The AI itself isn't really the focus though this time around. It's still very buggy and not good, but I wanted to focus more on the animations and physics for now. I wanted to see if I could do some of the animations, and well, animations are hard. So far, I've really only been doing first-person animations, which are easy enough to do, but going to full body is totally something else in its own right. I definitely want to try to be able to do some of these animations eventually, since I want certain attacks and whatnot, but that might have to wait for a while. For now, I'm using another zombie pack, and they look decent and have some pretty useful animations, but I'm still not sure about them since they especially seem a little slow for a horde shooter, so definitely subject to change, but that's just what we're working with for now. The real star of the show this time around, once again, is the physics. Now, this is something I really did want to just kind of copy and paste from the last project and just iterate on it more, but of course that didn't really work at all. For some reason, physics works slightly differently than they did in Unreal 4, especially in the physical animation department. The values for physical animations, which make the bodies try and keep the master pose, just didn't line up as good as they did in Unreal 4 for some reason.
Like, that's what happens with that. And in UE4, like, it just goes forward and it goes backwards in UE5, and it, like, it's just so bizarre.
I didn't have to redo the entire physics asset, but it took a lot of tweaking to get it working similarly as it did. Not sure why it was different. Of course, there's still not much documentation on any of it, so it was a lot of trial and error, but in the end, I got pretty close to what I had. I'm definitely gonna have to keep my eye on it, but for now, it's looking pretty solid. I wanted to add something new, though, and that's the new limb dismemberment system. You can now shoot off basically any limb, and the zombie will react to it. For example, if you shoot off the legs, it will fall down and start to crawl towards you. And if you shoot off an arm, it'll start attacking you you with its other arm, stuff like that. And when you shoot off a limb, you'll get this nice blood fountain effect, which I first demoed in that concept build, but now I've fully remade it Niagara instead of Cascade, which was the old particle system. It looks mostly the same, but later on I plan on making it more dynamic with varying degrees of length and duration, along with hopefully some blood decals and all that good stuff. Already though, it's already looking pretty sweet. This all ended up proving to be pretty difficult though, as I didn't have separate limb assets in the first place, and detaching limbs in the correct pose wasn't as straightforward as I thought it was going to be. The first problem was having limbs spawn to begin with. There's a nice function in Unreal called hide bone by name, which on its own can take care of hiding certain limbs, but unfortunately not the other way around. When you hide a certain bone, all the children of that bone are also hidden, so I couldn't just, for example, hide all the other bones but the left arm. All the limbs were attached to the spine, so hiding the spine would just hide the whole mesh. So just as I thought I was able to be free from the clutches of Blender for the time being, there wasn't much of a prettier way of doing it other than going into each zombie mesh and cutting out each limb individually. Now, I'm not a 3D modeler or anything, but fortunately some Blender modifiers were able to make the process at least a little less painful, albeit with some drawbacks. Quite literally cutting the models made it so that there's basically a hole on the edge of the mesh where the cut was made, and while not always noticeable, it's definitely there. Now I know if any 3D artists are watching, they're probably cringing at the fact of how easy adding in some vertices and a simple red texture could fix that, and they're not wrong, but there's about 54 different zombie models, and not even accounting for the special models, multiplied by the limbs, they all have around 270 meshes I would have to go in and add vertices for. Combine that with the fact that any type of artwork makes my own limbs devoid of any sensory function, let alone 3D modeling. It opens a whole can of worms that quite frankly I don't really have much time for at the moment. I'm hoping I'll be able to think of something to mask what's going on there, but I still think it's better than not having any dismemberment at all though. So with that being said, moving it all into Unreal was still a pretty big challenge. I made sure each limb had the same skeleton as the base mesh so that I can copy the pose from the main mesh so that when the limbs are called to be detached, they'll be in the same exact spot. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? I'm not really sure why this ended up being as buggy as it was. Why does it do that? And the solutions were also pretty ambiguous as to why they even worked in the first place, so I'll spare you the details of all that nonsense as it pretty much was just straight nonsense. In the end though, I got it pretty much working exactly how I wanted, and it looked pretty damn clean. I honestly can't wait to see how it integrates with melee combat, as it's going to feel really nice to slice limbs off and whatnot, but that's still a little ways to come. For now, I thought it'd be cool to see how it'd look in an explosion, so I cooked up some grenade animations, threw some at a crowd, and I gotta say, seeing the confetti of blood and body parts was a really cool sight to see. Gosh, I sound like a fucking psychopath. But for real, gore effects like that really go a long way into making killing things a lot more satisfying and actually a sight to see. So it's shaping up pretty good so far. So that's pretty much all I got so far. As you can see, I've been messing around a little bit with the voxel plugin for Unreal Engine, which hopefully I can figure out how to use for the map. It'll definitely be a challenge, but so cool if I can get the hang of it. Unfortunately though, it doesn't seem like it'll make it to the next devlog, as they had to delay the Unreal 5 version quite a bit just as I was editing this video. But I mean, there's still a mountain of other things I gotta do in the meantime. Speaking of which, if you want to keep up to date, as these devlogs do take a little while to release, and since I usually don't go over everything that I do in the devlogs, made a cheeky little Discord where you can get some semi-regular updates on what I'm currently doing, get updates on when I might start streaming and whatnot, and you know, just chill out with the boys. The link will be at the end of the video and in the description. Anyways, I hope to see you guys there, and regardless, hope to see you guys again soon.